How you doing?
I'm good.
You got
Good morning. Today's markup will be brief, so I'll get right down to business. On our agenda, we've got 3 administrative committee matters and 1 nomination listed. The minority, as well as myself, have exercised their right and my right under the committee rules to hold over the nomination of Kashyap Patel to be director of the FBI. So that nomination is held over. Before we turn to administrative matters, I'd like to point out that committee Democrats are establishing a double standard by forcing us to meet this morning. Last Congress, Republicans routinely required the committee to meet in person, did not require the committee to meet in person just to hold over nominations. Republicans extended this courtesy at least 17 times last Congress, even when very controversial nominees were on the agenda. But now that Republicans are in the majority, Democrats on this committee are not extending the same practice to us. Our committee works best when both sides uphold norms, regardless of which party holds the majority at any one time. I'm disappointed that my colleagues aren't reciprocating a courtesy we extended in good faith when we were in the minority. Now I'll be glad to turn to Ranking Member Durbin, and then we'll take up the administrative matters that we have to deal with.
Chairman Grassley, you're right. What you said is true. Under Chairman Graham, we tried to avoid meeting if it wasn't absolutely necessary, and we did that on a bipartisan basis. And I think I speak for the Democratic side. We hope to return to that model. This is an extraordinary nomination, the Kashyap Patel nomination, that leads us to want to meet today to spend a moment. We sent a letter. We received similar letters from the Republicans in the past asking for another hearing on Mr. Patel. And the obvious response from the Republican side is we've already had our hearing. We're not going to have another one. I'm disappointed, not surprised, but disappointed, because I think there are several things that we have to acknowledge. Number one, this is an unusual nomination. Unusual, and it's a 10-year nomination. I mean, we decided 50 years ago to reform the selection of the FBI head to make sure that we took politics out of the equation. And so we said 10 years, that's going to transcend at least one president, maybe 2, the service of an individual. So 10 years is a pretty long time, and it, I think, merits extra consideration and review. Secondly, the hearing of this individual raised questions that I'm sure a lot of people were surprised about. Why did we spend so darn much time talking about a musical recording, the J6 choir? We did because Mr. Patel basically denied any knowledge of the creation of this musical enterprise and the people who were involved in it. He was very proud of the musical selection, which he was playing at rallies for President Trump, and he was very much involved in calling these folks political prisoners who had stormed the Capitol on January 6th. And yet, when we asked him about him, he denied that he had any real knowledge of who was involved and what they were doing here. I look at, I'm trying to find one quote. He was on Steve Bannon's show. Mr. Patel claimed he didn't have anything to do with the January 6th prison choir, which includes January 6th rioters who violently assaulted police officers. Here's what he said to Steve Bannon, quote, "We got this idea to record the January 6th prisoners who recite the national anthem every night from the DC prison. Then we took that to the studio, so we mastered and digitized it." I mean, that's a direct contradiction under oath of his involvement. What difference does it make? A recording, come on, Durbin, move on. The recording was of political prisoners who stormed this Capitol and assaulted 140 of our best and brightest and most well-trained people that guard us every single day, the Capitol Police and their DC counterparts. They are trying to, some people are trying to lionize insidious effort by these thugs who came and stormed the Capitol and were screaming out, "Hang Vice President Pence." I hope that we don't fall into this trap of trying to rewrite history as to what happened on January 6th. That was an atrocious display of political might, and at the expense of some wonderful people who guard us every single day in this Capitol. There are some here who wouldn't, and when we went through this hearing, they disparaged the very thought that these people would be pardoned if they were guilty of violence against the police. One of my colleagues here called it absurd and hypothetical. Well, it turned out to not be so absurd. On the first day he was president, and his second term, Donald Trump issued a blanket pardon for all those who had been arrested. Mr. Patel was part of this lionization of these thugs who took over the Capitol or tried to take it over on that day. I don't want history to be wrong or misleading about what actually happened. Now what's happening? Questionnaires are going out in the Department of Justice and the FBI as to whether individuals serving our country in those agencies were involved in January 6 prosecutions. Yesterday, I met an individual who wants to be the Deputy Attorney General, Todd Blanche. Made a good impression. Some of you probably met him too. He appears to be a well-versed, well-trained attorney. He was personal attorney to President Trump in one of his lawsuits. Back in the day, he was working for the U.S. Attorney's Office in New York. And I asked him, when you started working there, did they let you pick and choose the files you worked on? He said, of course not. You were assigned, particularly if you were low in seniority, you were assigned cases. So I said, to say that a person worked on a January 6th case, if they are new to the agency, is it possible that they were ordered to do that case? He said, it's possible. I said, should that be held against him? He didn't think it should, nor does anyone else, I hope. They did the job they were assigned to do. And now we have this kind of survey of the Department of Justice and the FBI to determine who was involved in the January 6 prosecutions. If this is an effort to punish them, dismiss them, or treat them poorly because they did what they were supposed to do as professionals, that's wrong. And I look at the involvement of Kashyap Patel in this whole episode from start to finish. I read his book start to finish, and I can tell you he does not have the temperament for the job. And if you're honest about it, you'll join me in thinking that. He is always trying to go after those who disrespected him and wronged him politically and get even with them. For God's sake, to give the most sweeping investigative agency in the United States and the world over to this man to settle political scores is something we're going to regret. That's why we asked for a second hearing on this. I hope that we don't have to do it again, and I hope that some members on the Republican side will think twice on this issue.
Okay. Now for the business of the committee.
Mr. Chairman.
Listen, I'd rather do our administrative business.
Then can I speak?
I wasn't planning on anybody speaking.
I'd like to respond to what Senator Durgan said.
Okay, let's,
In that case, I'd like to line up behind Senator Kennedy to speak myself.
okay. I'll call on Senator Kennedy when we get done here. But let's make very clear. There's plenty of time for any sort of debate you want to do a week from today, right now, to discuss anything you want to discuss. This is usually a very short meeting, 17 times last year, last Congress. We let the Democrats have not having to meet under circumstances similar to this, so they didn't have to meet. Now we're here. So will this authorizing resolutions, will adopt the resolution by voice vote. All those in favor of adopting the committee authorizing resolution say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it, do have it. The authorizing resolution is adopted. Next, we'll adopt the committee rules. My staff and ranking member Durbin likewise have worked on these rules and have shared them with all of you in advance by voice vote. All those in favor of adopting committee rules say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it and do have it. The rules are adopted. Finally, we'll approve subcommittee and subcommittee memberships. These have been circulated in advance. All those in favor of approving subcommittees and subcommittee memberships say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it, do have it, and committee rules are adopted. Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to respond briefly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to respond briefly to my colleague, Senator Durbin. Senator, I listened carefully to what you said. I do not know a single member of this body that condones what happened on January 6th. And I want to be very clear. But the United States Supreme Court has been very clear. The United States Supreme Court has ruled that the United States Department of Justice overcharged many of the January 6th defendants using an Enron era obstruction of justice statute. And I don't see anything wrong with the Department of Justice under new leadership finding out or trying to find out why that happened. I'm curious. I know you're a good lawyer. You should be curious too. That's the only point I wanted to make.
Mr. Chairman?
Before you speak,
Yes, sir.
I think I want to clarify what point I've been trying to make. So I want to run this markup the way Chairman Durbin did. He asked members to, quote, wait until each nominee is called if they wish to make a comment on a specific nominee, end of quote. He also asked members not to speak on matters that were simply being held over and to wait until a matter was, quote, ripe for consideration to debate. We routinely were afforded the opportunity to speak on nominees that were simply being held over. We were not, I should say. We're not going to have a double standard here. And as I mentioned, for the last 2 years, committee Republicans didn't make Democrats meet just to hold over nominees. Senator Whitehouse.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to address the letter that three of us sent to you related to a new precedent that this committee seems to be setting. During the hearings, Senators Schiff and Booker and myself asked questions about what transpired in the grand jury that Kash Patel testified in. He was unwilling to disclose any of that, even though Rule 6E very plainly allows for a witness to come out of a grand jury and describe to the entire world what it is that they told the grand jury. He then said, when confronted with that legal fact, that he thought that there was a seal order of some kind that he was under that would prevent him from doing the customary witness disclosure that is commonplace, a commonplace right under 6E. In that regard, we've looked wherever we can. We've asked him where this order is. There is no sign of a seal order that would bear any relationship to his testimony. So there's the very real prospect that he's simply being untruthful about there being a seal order. The further aspect of this is that he asserted his Fifth Amendment privilege not to incriminate himself during the course of these proceedings. That, as a matter of law, requires that he have had a substantial and real risk of criminal prosecution when he made that assertion. So if an incoming FBI director has faced a time when he believed he had a substantial and real risk of criminal prosecution, it seems to me that it's pretty elementary that this committee, acting on his nomination to that office, should have some idea of what the crime would have been. And last, those of us who've practiced law understand that if a witness asserts a Fifth Amendment privilege and then appears in another proceeding, like a civil proceeding, for instance, and does not testify because of that Fifth Amendment privilege, the jury in that case will be instructed by the judge that those jurors are allowed to draw the adverse inference that what he would have testified had he not pled the Fifth would be adverse to his interests, and he could be treated as having testified adversely to his interests, that the facts would be adverse. So if a court, a regular district court in a regular trial, can draw that adverse interest about what is behind a Fifth Amendment assertion, then damn, this committee ought to be able to draw the same adverse interest or have that, adverse inference, or have that adverse inference dispelled by having this individual actually testify about it. If we want to do this in closed session, if we want to do this with some safeguards, all of that is fine. But you spoke very eloquently at the beginning of this, Mr. Chairman, about the importance of precedent. And I just want to mark right now that this is a first-time precedent in which a nominee for a senior law enforcement position in the United States of America has asserted a Fifth Amendment privilege about his own conduct and has testified in front of a grand jury, and the committee is being denied access either to the gravamen of his Fifth Amendment assertion or the content of his grand jury testimony. To me, that is an extremely dangerous and indeed even astonishing precedent. And I'll ask that the letter that we sent be put into the record.
Without objection, will be
Thank you, sir.
meetings adjourned.
This may be the first.